Chapter 1. The Promise. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast and cheap coffee. The kind Arden had been buying in bulk from the dollar store, because every penny mattered now. The cracked clock above the counter ticked toward midnight, but neither of them seemed ready to sleep. Iris sat at the table, still in her nursing scrubs, her hair tied messily into a bun. A few strands fell into her face, framing the exhaustion that had settled in her eyes. She rubbed at her temples and muttered, "Just a few more months, babe. Then we'll finally breathe." Arden looked up from the bills scattered across the table. The light flickered above them, casting their shadows long across the peeling linoleum floor. He forced a smile, the kind that hides fatigue behind faith. "I'll carry us till then," he said softly, pushing a mug of coffee toward her. She smiled weakly, her lips trembling around the edges. "You already are. God, I don't know how you do it." He shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. "Lots of caffeine, and the thought of you in that white coat, making enough to finally get us out of this shoebox." Ira laughed quietly. "Don't forget who's going to be the first patient. You'll need all kinds of therapy after working 2 jobs for me." He chuckled, though his back ached from the double shifts at the factory and part-time deliveries. His hands were calloused, his eyes dull with exhaustion. But when he looked at her, something softened inside him. She was his reason. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist. "You know I'll make it up to you one day, right? Once I graduate, things will be different. Better." Arden covered her hand with his. "I don't need anything back, Ira. Just finish what you started. That's all the payback I need." Her eyes flickered toward him, a look of guilt or gratitude. It was hard to tell. She nodded, pulling her hand away and glancing at the textbooks spread over the couch. "I should study a bit more before bed. We have an exam in the morning." He frowned. "It's midnight, Ira." "I know, but everyone's meeting at the library for a late group review. It's important." Arden hesitated. He didn't like how often these late-night study sessions had become. "You sure you can't study here?" She gave him a look, tired, a bit defensive. "It's not the same. Dylan's bringing notes from the professor. If I miss this one, I'll fall behind." Dylan. That name had been coming up more often lately, the friendly classmate who helped everyone out. Arden forced another small smile. "All right, drive safe, okay?" She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "You worry too much." When she left, the silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual. Arden stared at the door long after it shut, listening to the sound of her car pulling away. He rubbed his face and sighed, turning back to the table. The bills were still there, overdue rent, credit card payments, medical insurance. He picked one up, traced the due date with his thumb, and whispered to himself, "Just a few more months." He tried to distract himself, washing dishes, cleaning up Ira's textbooks, folding laundry. Every small act felt like proof of his commitment, his promise to carry them both through the storm. But as the clock crept past 1 a.m., his chest grew tight. She hadn't texted. He typed, "You make it okay?" No reply. By 2 a.m., he had dozed off on the couch. When the door finally creaked open, he woke instantly. Ira slipped inside quietly, her hair undone, her perfume mixed with something unfamiliar. Cologne? Or maybe just the scent of the night. "You're still up?" she whispered. He rubbed his eyes. "Just waiting to make sure you got back safe." She smiled faintly. "You didn't have to." Couldn't sleep. He noticed her phone light up briefly. A message. She tilted the screen away before setting it face down on the counter. "Study group went late?" he asked. "Yeah, Dylan had the flashcard we needed. We lost track of time." He nodded, trying to ignore the flicker of unease in his stomach. "I trust you," he said quietly, as if saying it aloud might make it true. She gave him a tired smile and disappeared into the bedroom. Arden sat alone for a moment longer, staring at the darkened screen of her phone. Then he turned off the lights and followed her. The next morning began like most mornings, with alarms, coffee, and exhaustion. Arden kissed her cheek before leaving for work. "I'll be back late," he said, grabbing his tool bag. "Don't work too hard," she murmured sleepily, pulling the blanket over her head. At the factory, the air smelled like hot oil and metal. Arden worked in rhythm, his muscles remembering each movement, his mind drifting elsewhere. Every clang of the machinery reminded him what he was fighting for, the life they'd promised each other. When he came home that evening, the apartment was quiet again. Ira wasn't back yet. Her textbooks were gone from the couch. The dinner he'd made was cold. He sat alone at the table, scrolling through his phone. Social media showed a picture, Ira and her classmates at a cafe, smiling, Dylan's arm casually behind her chair. He swallowed hard. Just friends, he told himself. She's working hard. For us. When she walked in hours later, laughing softly into her phone, Arden looked up. She stopped mid-sentence. "Oh, hey. Didn't see you there." He smiled gently. "Long day." She nodded quickly, tucking her phone away. "Yeah, just exhausted." He studied her for a second longer before nodding. "I'll heat up your dinner." As he stood in the kitchen, reheating the pasta, Ira sat at the table scrolling again, smiling at her screen. Arden placed the plate in front of her and kissed the top of her head. "I'm proud of you, you know that." She looked up, her eyes flickering, guilt again, or maybe surprise. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Thanks, babe." He smiled, hiding the ache in his chest. He didn't see the text that buzzed across her phone right then. "Dylan, can't stop thinking about you. Same time tomorrow?" Ira turned the phone face down again. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. Arden watched it in silence, unaware that his love, was already starting to drown beneath it. Just a few more months, he thought again, and smiled. "I'll carry us till then." Chapter 2. Subtle Red Flags. Arden noticed it first in the smallest details. It began with the clothes. Ira had always been simple: jeans, scrubs, messy buns, the occasional soft sweater when she wanted to feel cozy. But now, there were new things hanging in her closet. Tight skirts, silk blouses, heels that looked like they belonged in an office, not a hospital. The first morning he saw her in one of those outfits, he smiled despite himself. "Someone's looking sharp today," he said, flipping eggs on the pan. She adjusted her earring in the mirror by the door. "Professionalism matters, Arden. You never know who's watching." He nodded, setting her plate on the table. "I like the old you better. Less perfume, more pancakes." She laughed, that light, easy laugh he loved, but it felt different. The old me didn't have a career yet. When she left, the faint scent of her perfume lingered in the kitchen long after the door shut. He stood there a while, spatula in hand, wondering when things had started to feel formal between them. At first, he told himself it was stress. Nursing school, exams, rotations, it was enough to make anyone distant. But the changes kept piling up. She started keeping her phone close, always face down, always silent. When she laughed at something on the screen, she'd turn away, thumb flying quickly across the keyboard. One evening, Arden tried to make it better. He came home early, his hands carrying grocery bags filled with her favorites. Pasta, red wine, candles. He even bought flowers, a small, bright bouquet that made the cashier smile. He cooked while humming an old song they used to dance to in their kitchen. The smell of garlic butter filled the apartment. When Ira walked in, she froze at the sight of the table set for two, candles flickering. "What's all this?" Arden grinned. "You've been working so hard. I thought we could take a night for us." Her smile faltered. "Arden, I have a study meeting tonight." "I can't," he interrupted softly. "It's just one dinner. They'll understand." She sighed, set her bag down. "You don't get it. I can't keep missing these, or I'll fall behind." He looked at her, really looked. The frustration in her eyes wasn't about studying. It was something else. Something unspoken. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll save your plate." She leaned over, kissed his cheek quickly, and rushed out again, her heels clicking on the floor. When the door closed, the apartment felt emptier than ever. Arden sat down alone and picked at his food, staring at the candles until they melted into puddles of wax. A few nights later, she came home late again. It was past midnight, and Arden was half asleep on the couch, TV flickering in the dark. The lock turned. Ira tiptoed inside. "Hey," he murmured, rubbing his eyes. She jumped slightly. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." He sat up. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." She kicked off her heels and set her phone on the counter. The screen lit up briefly, a name flashing before the light dimmed. "Dylan." Arden blinked, his stomach tightening. He tried to keep his voice calm. That Dylan guy, you talk about him a lot. You too close. Ira turned sharply, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just curious. He's a classmate, Arden. We study together. That's all. He raised his hands in surrender. I wasn't accusing you of anything. She crossed her arms, defensive. Then stop acting like it. I just asked a question. Her voice sharpened. Don't you trust me? The words hung in the air like smoke, sharp, bitter, impossible to swallow. Arden stared at her. For a second, he wanted to argue, to demand answers. But then he saw how tired she looked, the dark circles under her eyes, the stress written across her face. Maybe she was just overworked. Maybe he was the problem, reading too much into things. He sighed and leaned back. Yeah, I trust you. Ira grabbed her phone and disappeared into the bedroom. The door clicked shut behind her. Arden sat there, staring at the dim light spilling from beneath the door. His chest felt tight, his thoughts heavier than he wanted to admit. Maybe I'm just paranoid, he told himself. She's working hard. For us. He glanced at the table. The flowers he bought a few days ago were wilting in their vase, petals curled and brown around the edges. He stood, walked over, and threw them into the trash. The sound of the bedroom door opening made him turn. Ira stepped out in her pajamas, brushing her teeth, phone still in hand. She avoided his eyes. Good night, she said softly. He nodded. Night. When she went to bed, Arden sat back down, staring at nothing. The laughter from her phone earlier still echoed in his mind, too warm, too playful. He rubbed his face and exhaled slowly. There had been a time when they told each other everything, when every text, every call, every moment was shared. But now, the small silences between them had grown wider. He looked toward the bedroom door again, the faint glow of her phone light visible through the crack. He wanted to ask who she was texting. He wanted to walk in there and demand to know what was happening to them. But instead, he whispered into the empty room, Don't you trust me? Echoing her own words back at himself. The question lingered unanswered, and somewhere deep inside, beneath all his hope and denial, Arden felt the first sting of something breaking. He didn't know it yet, but the promises they built their love on were starting to quietly crumble, one unanswered text at a time. The tension began simmering beneath the surface. Chapter 3. Graduation Day. The morning sun poured through the apartment window, golden and warm, touching everything except the cold space between them. Arden stood in front of the mirror, straightening the collar of his only decent shirt. It had been years since he dressed up for anything other than work. His hand shook slightly as he fixed his tie. Big day, huh? He said, glancing toward Ira. She was sitting at the edge of the bed, already dressed in her graduation gown, scrolling through her phone with a faint smile on her lips. Her cap rested beside her, tassel shimmering in the light. Yeah, she murmured without looking up. Feels unreal. Arden picked up the bouquet of lilies from the dresser, her favorite. He'd bought them the night before, even though they cost more than he should have spent. You deserve it, he said, trying to catch her eyes. You worked your ass off for this. Ira finally looked up, offering a faint smile. Thanks, Arden. Really. But there was distance in her tone, polite, not loving. He felt it, but brushed it off, convincing himself it was nerves. The campus was buzzing with laughter, camera flashes, and the sweet chaos of celebration. Rows of graduates in bright gowns filled the courtyard, their families waving from the stands. Arden found a seat near the middle, clutching the flowers tight, his heart swelling with pride. He watched her walk across the stage, her name echoing through the loudspeakers. Ira Voss. She smiled, radiant, stepping forward to shake the dean's hand. Her gown flowed behind her like a symbol of victory, of everything they had worked for together. Arden stood and clapped until his hands stung. That's my girl, he whispered under his breath, eyes shining. But as she scanned the crowd, her gaze didn't land on him. It moved past him, searching, darting, pausing somewhere else. Her smile widened, but not in his direction. Arden's clapping slowed. A dull ache spread through his chest. Who are you looking for, Ira? When the ceremony ended, chaos filled the air, proud parents, camera flashes, graduates hugging friends. Arden moved through the crowd, tall enough to spot her near the fountain. She wasn't alone. Dylan stood beside her, the same Dylan he'd seen in photos, the same name flashing on her phone at midnight. He was laughing, arm around her shoulders, saying something that made her smile in that way she hadn't smiled at Arden in months. Arden froze, forcing himself to keep calm. Maybe it's just a friendly hug. They went through school together. He approached with a smile that felt forced, the flowers trembling in his hands. "There's my graduate." Ira turned, startled, her smile flickering. "Arden, you made it." He tried to laugh. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." He held out the bouquet. "These are for you." She hesitated before taking them, glancing quickly at Dylan. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." Dylan extended a hand, grinning. "You must be the husband I've heard about. Ira said you worked like a machine to get her through." Arden shook his hand, firm and steady. "She's worth it." "Lucky woman," Dylan said with a charming smirk. "Yeah," Arden replied, his voice quiet. "She is." There was an awkward silence before Dylan excused himself to take pictures with another group. Arden turned to Ira. "You look incredible today." She smiled faintly. "Thanks, Arden. I still can't believe it's over." He wanted to say 100 things, how proud he was, how much he loved her, how all those long nights and double shifts were worth it just to see her in that gown. But the words stuck somewhere deep in his throat, swallowed by the way she kept glancing toward the crowd. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just a lot of people here." He nodded, forcing a laugh. "You were amazing up there." "Thanks." Her voice trailed off as her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, thumb hovering over the screen. "I need to take this," she said, stepping aside. Arden watched her walk away, the hem of her gown brushing the grass. The sound of her laughter carried faintly back to him, that same laugh he used to know so well. That night, back at the apartment, the air felt heavier than usual. Ira sat on the couch, scrolling through photos from the ceremony. Arden stood by the window, a beer in hand, the city lights flickering in the distance. He turned to her, voice soft. "We made it." She looked up, blinking as if pulled from another world. "What?" He smiled gently. "You and me. We made it." For a heartbeat, her eyes softened, and then the moment passed. She forced a small smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We did." Arden nodded, staring at her across the dimly lit room. Something inside him wanted to believe it. But as she turned back to her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's glow, Arden realized she wasn't really there anymore. Not in the way she used to be. And though he didn't know it yet, her heart had already begun to drift, far from the man who had carried her this far. She forced a smile, already emotionally gone. Chapter 4. The Divorce Papers. The evening light filtered weakly through the blinds, painting long shadows across the kitchen floor. It had been a month since Ira's graduation, yet the apartment felt colder than ever. The flowers Arden had given her that day had long since wilted in their vase, their petals dry and curled like forgotten promises. Arden stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup he wasn't even hungry for. He heard the front door open and close quietly. No cheerful, "I'm home," no kiss on the cheek. Just a faint shuffle of her heels and the sigh of a woman who didn't want to be there. "Hey," he said softly without turning. "You're back early." No answer. He turned, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Ira stood near the doorway, arms crossed, still wearing her coat. Her eyes were distant, unreadable. "You okay?" he asked, trying to smile. She didn't smile back. "Arden, can we talk?" The way she said it, calm, flat, deliberate, sent a chill down his spine. He nodded slowly and gestured toward the table. "Yeah, of course." They sat across from each other, the silence thick enough to choke on. Arden noticed her hands trembling slightly as she placed an envelope on the table. "I think we've grown apart," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I want a divorce." The words didn't hit all at once. They settled in slowly, cruelly, like ice creeping into his veins. Arden just stared at her, his mouth dry, unable to process the sound of what she'd just said. He finally managed to speak. "You what?" "I'm not happy, Arden. I haven't been for a while. And I don't want to keep pretending." He blinked, trying to find something to hold on to, a reason, an explanation, anything. "Is this about Dylan?" Her expression flickered, barely perceptible, before she looked away. Don't make this ugly. It's not about him. It's about us. Arden leaned back slowly, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Us, he echoed. Ira, I've given you everything. Every damn thing I had, time, money, years of my life. She cut him off sharply. And I never asked you to. That one hurt more than she could have known. He sat there, motionless, watching her as she stood and began pacing. You were always safe, Arden. Predictable. You worked, you came home, you cared, but that's not love anymore. That's routine. He rubbed his temples, feeling a hollow ache spreading in his chest. Routine? That routine paid for your school, kept the lights on, built this life. She stopped pacing, her tone sharp. And I'm grateful for that. I am. But I can't keep living a life that doesn't feel like mine. Arden stared down at the table, at the envelope she'd brought. He didn't touch it, didn't speak, just breathed, slow, heavy, controlled. Finally, he nodded once. If this is what you want, it is, she said quickly, almost too quickly. I need to find myself again. He looked up at her, searching her face for the woman he once knew, the woman who used to whisper dreams to him in the dark, who promised forever. But she was gone. All right, he said quietly. Then you'll get what you want. She blinked, as if she hadn't expected him to give in so easily. That's it. What do you want me to do, Ira? His voice cracked slightly but stayed calm. Beg you to stay? Make speeches about how much I love you? You've already left, just not physically yet. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked away. The next day, Arden sat at the table again, the same spot, same silence, staring at the divorce papers. His pen hovered above the signature line for a long time before he finally pressed down and signed. The finality of it was suffocating. He set the pen down, slid his wedding ring off his finger, and placed it beside the papers. When Ira walked in, he didn't look up. It's done, he said. She approached slowly, almost cautiously, as if expecting him to break. But he didn't. He stood, picked up the ring, and placed it gently in front of her. Take care, Ira. Her eyes narrowed slightly, lips curling into something almost cruel. You're really just going to walk away? No fight, no tears. He shook his head. You don't fight for someone who's already decided to leave. As he started packing his things, clothes, old photos, a few keepsakes, Ira leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You'll never move on without me, she said, smirking faintly. You're not built for that. Arden paused, turning to face her. His voice was calm, too calm. Maybe not, but I'll learn. She laughed softly, that same mocking tone she'd used when she was frustrated. You always say that. He zipped up his duffel bag, took one last look around the apartment, the life they'd built, now reduced to silence and memory, and walked toward the door. He placed his keys on the counter beside his phone, both symbols of the life he was about to leave behind. Then, without another word, he opened the door and stepped into the night. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty apartment, sharp, final, irreversible. He drove away that night, leaving his keys, his phone, his life behind. Chapter 5. Vanished without a trace. The rain poured hard that night, hammering against the windshield as Arden drove away from everything he'd ever known. The highway stretched ahead like an endless ribbon of darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning and the distant hum of 18-wheelers passing by. He didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing left behind worth seeing. His phone buzzed one last time in the passenger seat. He didn't check it. He rolled down the window, the cold air biting at his face, and tossed it into the storm. It vanished beneath the wheels of some passing car. Good riddance, he muttered under his breath. By dawn, he crossed the state line. The first thing Arden did was quit his job. He didn't give notice, didn't say goodbye. He simply walked into the manager's office, dropped his badge on the desk, and said, I won't be coming back. The man frowned. You sure about that, Voss? You've been solid here for years. Arden hesitated. The name felt foreign already. Yeah, I'm sure. He sold his truck next, the one he'd bought used but kept running all those years with his own hands. Watching another man drive it away felt like tearing out a piece of his own history. He emptied his savings account, took what cash he had left, and disappeared west. No forwarding address, no calls, no explanations. He was a ghost before anyone even realized he was gone. Weeks turned into months. He slept in cheap motels, sometimes in his car, sometimes under open skies. Somewhere in the quiet spaces between the miles, he stopped being Arden Voss. He forged a new identity, Arden Cole, a name plain enough to be forgettable. He found work in a small desert town called Arroyo Creek, a place that seemed permanently trapped between yesterday and nowhere. The population sign had faded numbers, and the main street consisted of a diner, a hardware store, and an auto shop with a rusted sign that read Ronan's Garage. Arden pulled in one morning, dust trailing behind his old sedan. The owner, a wiry man in his 50s with grease under his fingernails, squinted at him. "You fix cars, or just drive them till they die." Arden smiled faintly. "Bit of both." Ronan chuckled. "You're hired then." "Name?" Arden hesitated for only a breath. "Cole. Arden Cole." Life slowed to a steady rhythm after that. Early mornings at the shop, long hours under hoods and engines, the smell of oil and steel becoming his new world. He found peace in the simplicity of it, bolts, gears, things that could be fixed with effort and patience. Unlike people, he rented a small apartment above the diner. The landlady, Mrs. Reyes, was kind but curious. "Where you from, Arden?" she asked once, handing him his mail. He smiled politely. "Nowhere special." That became his favorite answer, vague and final. People respected a man who didn't pry and didn't talk much. Soon, the locals began to trust him. Farmers brought their trucks to him. Single mothers came in for brake repairs, and he'd wave off half their payment with a shrug. "Pay me next time," he'd say. Word spread. Cole's good people. Quiet but solid. He liked it that way. Sometimes, though, when the world got too quiet, the past crept in. A flash of Ira's smile. Her laughter echoing in a memory. The way her voice cracked when she said, "We've grown apart." He'd close his eyes and take a long breath, the scent of motor oil grounding him back to the present. "Don't look back," he told himself. You already buried that life. But there were nights when he couldn't help it. He'd sit on the steps outside his apartment, watching the stars fade above the desert horizon, and think about the man he used to be, the one who believed love could be earned through sacrifice. He'd take a sip of cheap whiskey, the kind that burned but didn't comfort, and whisper to the darkness, "You were a fool, Arden." Then he'd shake his head. "No, you just loved the wrong person." Years passed that way. His hair grew shorter, peppered with gray at the temples. His body hardened from labor. His silence became his armor. People respected him, not for his past, but for his steadiness, his quiet strength. When newcomers asked about him, the answer was always the same. "Cole? He's a good man. Keeps to himself. Reliable as sunrise." And that was all he needed to be. He didn't chase love anymore. Didn't chase dreams. He had traded both for peace, and peace, he learned, was its own kind of victory. Every so often, when a customer would thank him or a child would wave from a passing car, he'd feel something stir faintly inside him, something that reminded him he wasn't broken, just rebuilt. As he wiped the grease from his hands one quiet afternoon, the desert wind carried dust across the road, and for the first time in a long time, Arden smiled, not because he was happy, but because he was free. Silence is the best revenge, he thought. And in that silence, Arden Cole became known in Arroyo Creek as a man of few words but solid heart, reliable, kind, and strong. He became known in his new town as quiet but respected, reliable, kind, and strong. Chapter 6. The Ghosts of the Past. 10 years had a way of softening everything, even pain. By the time Arden turned 38, his life in Arroyo Creek had settled into something steady, something whole. The man who once vanished had rebuilt himself from dust and silence. His days began before sunrise, the desert still cool and quiet. He'd unlock the gates of Cole's Auto and Repair, the small shop he now owned, and start the coffee pot before the first customer arrived. Locals waved as they passed. Old Ronan had retired years ago, leaving the place to Arden with a simple note, "You've earned it, kid." Arden had grown into his solitude with quiet confidence. His movements were sure, deliberate. His voice calm, the kind of tone that made people listen. He'd learned that peace wasn't something given. It was something you built brick by brick, with routine, with purpose, with distance from everything that once hurt you. It was a warm Friday evening when it happened. Arden had just closed the shop, wiping the grease from his hands with a rag. The radio hummed softly, an old country song playing through static. He poured himself a drink from the small bottle he kept in the drawer, stepped outside, and sat on the hood of a half-fixed Chevy under the fading orange sky. The air smelled like dust and gasoline. Peaceful. Familiar. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. Then again. Then again. He frowned, pulling it out. The screen lit up, and for a second his breath caught. 169 missed calls. All from the same number. Unknown. He stared at it, confusion tightening in his chest. He didn't get calls like this. People in Arroyo Creek called him once, maybe twice if they needed something. No one called that many times. He scrolled down. The last missed call was only 10 minutes ago. Then, as he watched, the phone buzzed again. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Something cold crept up the back of his neck. Finally, he answered. Yeah. His voice was steady, though a quiet unease threaded through it. There was silence on the other end. Faint static, then a breath, a trembling inhale. Arden. He froze. That voice. Soft. Familiar. A decade older, maybe. But her. He swallowed hard, his heart thudding against his ribs. Who is this? The silence stretched, then broke. It's me, she whispered. It's Ira. For a moment, everything around him stopped, the desert wind, the fading music, even the hum of his thoughts. He closed his eyes, trying to steady himself. It can't be. Ira, he said finally, his voice quieter now, almost disbelieving. She sniffed, her tone shaky. Please, don't hang up. I need to talk to you. He didn't answer. His fingers tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned white. His mind flooded with images he thought he'd buried. The small apartment, her laughter, her tears, her words the night she'd left. He wanted to hang up. He should hang up. Instead, he said, Where did you get this number? I found your shop online. It took me months. Her voice cracked, raw with something that almost sounded like regret. Arden, please, I just need to see you. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. See me? After 10 years? After everything? Please, she whispered again. I know I don't deserve it, but I had to find you. He didn't realize he was shaking until he felt the phone slip slightly in his hand. He caught it before it fell. His chest felt tight, each breath shallow and uneven. Why now? He asked quietly. Why after all this time? She hesitated. Because I was wrong. He almost laughed again, but it came out broken, bitter. That's an understatement. Arden, she started, her voice trembling. Please, just answer me. Talk to me. I need to explain. He stared into the night sky, that vast stretch of desert stars that had listened to all his unspoken words for a decade. His jaw clenched. His pulse was loud in his ears. Then he looked at the screen again. The call had ended. She had hung up. He sat there for a long time, the weight of her voice echoing in his mind like a ghost that refused to stay buried. He opened the message screen, maybe to block the number, maybe to type something, maybe just to feel in control, but before he could, the phone buzzed again. One new message. He tapped it open. Arden, it's me. Please answer. He read it twice. 3 times. His heart pounded, slow, heavy, certain. Her voice. His heart pounds, her voice. Chapter 7. The Return. The morning Ira arrived, Arroyo Creek was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Arden was tightening the bolts on an engine, music playing low on the radio, when he heard the sound of tires crunching over gravel. He didn't look up at first. Customers came and went all the time, tourists, farmers, locals. But something about the way the engine idled outside made him pause. Hesitant. Familiar. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Uneven. He straightened and turned. She stood in the doorway of the shop, framed by sunlight and dust. Ira. 10 years had rewritten her face. She wasn't the polished, bright-eyed woman he'd once known. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray at the edges. Her eyes, once sharp with ambition, looked hollow, like she hadn't slept properly in years. She wore a faded coat, wrinkled at the sleeves, and clutched her bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Arden," she breathed, barely above a whisper. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman who destroyed him, but a stranger wearing her face. He wiped his hands with a rag, his voice steady. "You shouldn't be here." Her lips trembled. "I know. I had to see you." Arden turned back to the car, the wrench in his hand clicking against the metal. "You already did." She took a few hesitant steps forward. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." He exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the engine. "You've already had 10 years. Ira flinched. The sound of it, her quiet pain, barely touched him. He'd built too many walls since the day she'd left. Finally, he looked at her again. "Why are you here, Ira?" Her throat worked as she tried to form words. "Because I ruined everything. I ruined us." He didn't respond. "I thought I wanted more," she said quickly, voice trembling. "When I graduated, Dylan promised me everything, a career, a better life, excitement. And I believed him. God, I was stupid." Arden's jaw tightened at the name, but his expression didn't change. She kept talking, the words spilling out faster now. "We moved in together after the divorce. For a while, I thought I'd made the right choice. But he changed. He wasn't who I thought he was. The late nights, the drinking, the women. Eventually he left, just packed up and disappeared. I lost the apartment, lost my job. I lost everything." She took a shuddering breath, her voice cracking. "And all I could think about was you." Arden set the wrench down, the clink echoing in the stillness. "Why?" "Because you were the best thing that ever happened to me," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You worked yourself to the bone for me, and I threw it all away. I told myself I'd find happiness, but all I found was emptiness. You were the only one who ever loved me for who I was." He studied her for a long moment, the way her shoulders sagged, the desperation in her voice. Once, those words would have broken him. Now, they barely stirred a ripple. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" he asked quietly. Not angry, just calm, measured. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Every day since, I've thought about it. Every night. I wake up and see your face in my dreams. You don't know how sorry I am." Arden took a slow step toward her, stopping just short of arm's length. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of everything he'd become. "You know what's strange?" he said. "I used to imagine this moment. You showing up one day, saying all the right things, begging me to forgive you. I thought maybe then I'd feel better. Maybe it would heal something." Her breath hitched. "And does it?" He shook his head. "No, because the man who needed that, he's gone." Ira blinked, her tears falling freely now. "Please, Arden, I'm not asking for us to start over. I just needed you to know that I still love you." He gave her a long, unreadable look, then glanced toward the open desert beyond her. "Love," he said quietly, "isn't a word you get to use after what you did." She sobbed once, covering her face with her hands. He turned back toward the car, picking up the wrench again, the sound of her crying fading into the hum of cicadas outside. After a while, she straightened, wiping her tears, and whispered, "Is there really nothing left of the man who once loved me?" He tightened the last bolt, his movements slow and deliberate. Then he looked over his shoulder, eyes calm, voice even. "That man you loved died 10 years ago," he said. Chapter 8. The truth comes out. Ira hadn't planned on coming back. Not after everything that happened. Not after what she'd become. But as she stood in front of Arden's shop, the man she once threw away, the past came flooding back in sharp, painful fragments. She could still remember the day she left him, the way she laughed when he said, "Take care." Ira, thinking she was walking toward a brighter future. But that laughter had long since died. It started 2 months after the divorce. Dylan had promised her the world, a new city, a new apartment, connections that would fast-track her career. At first, it seemed real. He'd take her out to rooftop bars, kiss her under city lights, tell her, "You deserve better than a man stuck under the hood of a car." She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe she'd made the right choice. But soon the cracks began to show. He came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. His phone was always face down. He'd disappear for entire weekends and brush off her questions with a smirk. Don't start acting like a jealous wife, he'd snap. You said you wanted excitement. This is it. She told herself it was fine, that he was just busy. But one night, she saw the messages. Can't wait to see you again, babe. Your wife doesn't suspect? Her hands had trembled as she scrolled. Every message felt like a knife twisting deeper. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. You knew what this was? Dylan said coldly, pouring himself a drink. You wanted to have fun, remember? You wanted freedom. Freedom doesn't mean being humiliated, she screamed. He turned, eyes sharp. Then maybe you should have stayed with your mechanic husband. Oh wait, you thought you were too good for him, didn't you? That night, she slept in her car. By morning, he'd changed the locks. The years that followed blurred into survival. Her nursing career stalled. Dylan's friends, the ones who once toasted to her new beginning, vanished when the money ran out. She took temp jobs, lived in a cramped studio, and tried not to cry when collection agencies called. She'd look at old photos sometimes, her and Arden sitting on that worn-out couch in their first apartment, laughing over cheap takeout. She'd zoom in on his smile, the way he looked at her like she was his world. That look haunted her more than Dylan's betrayal ever did, because she realized too late. She hadn't just lost Arden. She destroyed the only person who ever truly loved her. It took her nearly a decade to track him down. Every clue felt like chasing smoke. His name vanished from records. No social media, no digital footprint. It wasn't until she found an old mutual friend, one who mentioned a mechanic named Cole working in some desert town, that she dared to hope. And now here she was, standing in front of him again after 10 years. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "You have no idea how long I've been looking for you." Arden leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, silent, his face unreadable. "Every night, I'd replay that day," she continued. "The way you looked at me when I said I wanted a divorce. I thought I was chasing happiness, but all I did was run from it." "Ira," Arden said softly, cutting her off. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." Her voice broke. "Because you deserve to know what really happened." He sighed, eyes fixed on the concrete floor. "I already know enough." "No," she insisted. "You don't. Dylan, he used me, lied to me. He had other women. He left me with nothing. I was so blind, Arden. I thought I was getting more, but all I got was empty promises." She stepped closer, tears streaking her cheeks. "And when it all fell apart, when I had no one, I realized what I'd thrown away. You were my safe place, my peace." Arden's jaw flexed, but his voice stayed calm. "Then why did you leave?" "Because I was stupid," she whispered. "Because I thought love wasn't enough. But it was. You were." He closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. Inside, something stirred, not love, not forgiveness, but a quiet ache. A reminder of who he once was and what she took from him. Part of him pitied her, this fragile, broken version of the woman who once held his heart. But another part, deeper and colder, remembered every night he lay awake wondering why he wasn't enough. Every morning he told himself she'd come home, and she didn't. She reached out, her fingers trembling. "Please, Arden, say something." He opened his eyes, meeting hers calm, steady, and utterly unreachable. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "I wonder if you ever really loved me, or just loved what I gave you." Her hand dropped. Her lip quivered. "I loved you. I swear I did." He studied her, the tears, the guilt, the desperate sincerity. Then he turned away, his voice low but certain. "Maybe once," he said, "but the part of me that needed to hear that died the night you left." She stood there in silence, her heart breaking all over again, while he walked past her, the faint scent of oil and dust lingering in the air. Inside him, two truths warred quietly, pity for the woman she'd become, and the memory of every night she made him doubt himself. Arden's internal conflict. Part of him pities her. Part of him remembers every night she made him doubt himself. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The sun was sinking low over Arroyo Creek, bleeding orange light across the quiet desert town. Arden stood outside his shop, locking up for the evening, when he saw her again. Ira, standing across the street, clutching her coat, her eyes rimmed red. He sighed softly. He told himself the last time would be the last time, that she'd take the hint, let him live in peace. But some ghosts don't stay buried. She crossed the street slowly, her footsteps echoing in the still air. "Arden," she called softly. He didn't turn around. "What are you still doing here, Ira?" I just need to talk to you," she said, voice trembling. "Please." Arden turned, leaning against the hood of a pickup truck. "You've already said everything you came to say." No, her voice cracked. "Not everything." He folded his arms, waiting. She took a shaky breath. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I can't leave without asking." She swallowed hard. "Is there any chance we could start over? Not as who we were, but as who we are now." Arden stared at her, unmoving. His silence pressed against her words like weight. "I'm not asking for you to love me again," she continued, tears forming. "Just give me a chance to make things right, to fix what I broke." He exhaled slowly and stepped closer, his eyes sharp but calm. "You know what's funny, Ira?" She blinked through tears. "What?" "When I needed you most, you left. When you needed me, you came back." His tone was even, almost gentle, but it hit harder than a shout. "That's not love. That's convenience." Her lips parted, her breath catching as if the words had physically struck her. Arden shook his head. "You didn't come here for me. You came here because you couldn't live with what you did. You want peace of mind, not forgiveness." She stepped forward, desperation rising in her voice. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't lived every day wishing I'd stayed? I know I can't undo it, Arden, but I want to try. Please, just..." The roar of an engine cut through the stillness. Both turned toward the sound, a black car swerving into the gravel lot, tires screeching to a stop. The door slammed open. Dylan. He stumbled out, half drunk, eyes bloodshot, his shirt unbuttoned. "Ira," he barked, his voice slurred. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ira froze, her face going pale. "Dylan." He stalked forward, unsteady but furious. "You think you can just disappear? After everything I did for you?" Arden stepped instinctively between them, his posture calm but solid. "You need to leave," he said. Dylan sneered. "Who the hell are you?" "Her mechanic boyfriend." Arden's jaw flexed. "Something like that." "Stay out of this, man," Dylan spat, waving a bottle in his hand. "This is between me and her." Ira's voice shook. "Dylan, stop. You're drunk." "Drunk." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're too good for me now? Running back to your saintly husband after I gave you a taste of the real world." Arden's eyes hardened. "Last warning. Get in your car and go." Dylan stepped closer, the smell of alcohol heavy between them. "Or what? You gonna play hero now, huh? You couldn't keep her then, and you can't keep her now." Arden's fists tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "You're right. I don't want to keep her. I just want you to walk away before you do something you regret." "Regret?" Dylan scoffed. "Only thing I regret is letting her crawl back to you." He lunged forward, his hand grabbing Ira's arm. She cried out, trying to pull free. "Let me go." Arden moved fast. He caught Dylan by the wrist, twisting it just enough to make him drop the bottle. It shattered on the ground. Dylan staggered back, cursing. Arden's tone dropped to a low, dangerous calm. "You touch her again, and I'll make sure you never forget it." For a moment, Dylan met his eyes and saw something there that made him back off. The steady strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Get in your car," Arden said again, voice cold. Dylan spat on the ground, but turned away, muttering curses as he climbed into his car. The engine revved, tires squealing as he tore down the road, disappearing into the horizon. Iris stood there trembling, tears streaking her face. "Arden, thank you." He shook his head. "Don't." She looked at him, broken. "Why did you stop him if you don't care anymore?" He met her gaze, steady, unreadable. "Because it ends here. All of it. The lies, the pain, the regret. I'm not doing this dance anymore." Her lip quivered. "So that's it." Arden nodded once, firm. "That's it." He turned toward his truck, his boots crunching over the gravel. She reached out, her voice barely a whisper. "Arden, please." He didn't stop. He didn't look back. The desert wind carried her sobs away as he climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove off into the setting sun, leaving behind the ghost that had haunted them both for far too long. He warns Dylan never to come near her again, then walks away without looking back. Chapter 10. Redemption. The desert sky was painted in shades of gold and amber, the sun sliding slowly toward the horizon. Arden leaned against the hood of an old Ford pickup outside his shop, arms crossed, letting the warmth settle into his bones. The air smelled faintly of dust, oil, and the faint hint of sage drifting from the hills beyond the town. For the first time in a long while, the world felt steady. No chaos, no past ghosts rattling at the edges of his mind. Just him, the desert, and the hum of his small shop behind him. He heard the soft crunch of tires on gravel and glanced up. Maris was driving her little hatchback into the lot, the same way she did every few weeks. She waved from the window, a bright smile on her face. "Hey, Arden," she called. He returned the gesture, a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. The corners of his eyes softened. "Hey, Maris, need anything today?" She laughed lightly. "Just the usual. Brakes and a little tune-up. Nothing fancy." "Got it," he said, stepping toward the garage. The engine bay glimmered faintly in the sunset. "I'll take care of it." The afternoon slipped into evening as he worked on her car. He moved deliberately, hand steady, feeling the familiar rhythm of wrenches, sockets, and bolts. It was a kind of meditation, a quiet therapy he'd discovered over the years. Maris sat on a stool nearby, sipping a coffee she'd brought with her, chatting lightly about school. "The kids are driving me crazy," she said with a laugh, shaking her head. "One of them glued a pencil to the desk today." Arden chuckled, wiping grease from his hands. "Sounds like my kind of chaos." She looked at him, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "You ever get bored, Arden? Just stuck in this little town forever?" He shook his head. "No, I like this life. Simple, steady, predictable." She smiled softly, sensing the calm that had taken years to carve into him. "I can see that. It suits you." Arden felt a warmth in her words, not the kind that demanded, but the kind that offered quiet companionship. A presence that didn't ask for him to fix her, just allowed him to be whole. As the sun dipped lower, the golden light stretching across the desert, Arden paused and leaned against the hood again, watching Maris pack up and wave before she drove off. He felt something he hadn't in years, a flicker of ease, a tiny spark of hope. He breathed deeply, the wind rustling through the sparse trees, carrying dust and memory alike. He thought about the past 10 years, the betrayal, the silence, the heartbreak that had reshaped him. He thought about Ira, her apologies, the confrontation, and the closure that came not from words, but from his decision to walk away. He smiled faintly to himself, the kind of smile that only comes after surviving storms that once seemed insurmountable. Some ghosts don't deserve closure, just distance. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the grit of the day and the peace of living without the weight of her shadow pressing down on him. He remembered the nights he spent lying awake, haunted by her laughter and his own questions. And now, the nights were quiet. The answers he'd needed had never come from her. They'd come from himself. He glanced at the horizon where the sun was bleeding its last light, the sky shifting into deep purples and blues. The desert was still, alive only with the distant hum of insects and the soft rustle of leaves. And in that stillness, Arden felt fully present. He felt steady. He felt free. Maris's little hatchback disappeared down the dusty road, leaving only the echo of her wave behind. Arden returned to the shop, closing the garage door with a satisfied click. The interior smelled faintly of oil, leather, and memories of a life rebuilt. He leaned against the workbench for a moment, letting his thoughts settle. Life isn't about chasing ghosts, he thought. It's about carving a space for yourself, where the past doesn't hold you hostage. He smiled again, this one broader, more certain. No hesitation, no pain lurking beneath it. Just the simple joy of a life that belonged to him, built brick by brick through years of silence, solitude, and hard work. The desert was quiet around him, gold fading to indigo, and for the first time in a decade, Arden didn't feel the need to explain anything, didn't need to justify his existence to anyone. He just existed, fully, finally, on his own terms. And in that silence, he realized something profound. Sometimes the strongest statements aren't shouted. Sometimes strength is quiet. Sometimes the loudest declaration of all is simply walking away from the chaos and living well in the calm. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the desert wind brush his face, and whispered to himself a statement that carried the weight of years. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the loudest way to say you're done.